Hi, welcome to the Mindset. We are at episode 16, I believe. And today we have a special guest from Ohio. If you would, tell us a little bit about who you are and your background. Who are we talking to today? Who are people listening to?
I'm Alexandra Elfers. Some might know me as Alexandra Vassar, going through a name change process, but I've been a behavior analyst since 2020. I've been working in autistic advocacy and behavior analysis since 2018 or so.
Mhm.
Um, I'm autistic myself, so I am probably the least traditional BCBA behavior analyst you're ever going to come across, in that I believe that behaviorism itself is a big part of societal's problems, and how we that worldview and viewing um, things as purely behavioral causes a lot of issues. Like, no, they're
Mhm.
reasonable reactions to the environment. So kind of I try to bring that into everything that I do in working with clients and helping people shift their understanding of what they observe of people in their environment, and how to be accepting. And I don't really believe in tolerance. I think human beings are worth more than tolerance.
Mhm.
uh but how do you cope with uh behavior that you don't want to see?
Right.
They're probably coping with behavior they don't want to see from you too, so kind
Yeah,
of.
this is true.
So behavior analyst, autistic advocacy. Uh, I have way too many hobbies to count. I'm a cat mom of 7. I'm a non-binary trans individual. Uh, Multiply disabled myself, so it's not just something that I leave at the door at home. Like, the things that I do with clients are the things that I do to try to survive my own life as a disabled
Mhm.
person. I have meltdowns like the clients that I work with, and I gotta track with myself during those because I live alone. It's me,
Yeah.
myself, and I, and my 7 cats at my house.
Right.
So it's a party over here. Um, and background before that's in physics. So if you like science, I'm a big old nerd, like D&D and things like that. So I don't know if that's a comprehensive enough intro.
Uh, I think that's more than a great starting point. So, so I like that you bring up physics because I trained you obviously back in 23, so that was my first time getting to meet you and doing some research, learning a little bit about you. Now, you originally studied physics and actually graduated with a Bachelor of Science. So, what took you from the world of studying physics to where we are today, opening your own consulting business with clinical based services?
So much. I've lived a lot of lives in an amount of years that I don't have a right to have lived. That hopefully made a complete sentence. Um, so I studied physics because I love stars. I love understanding how things work. There's this running joke in physics spaces that physicists are the people who never grew out of the Y phase. But I see the Y phase as the how phase. It's like, what are you really asking for when you're asking for why something works? You're asking for how.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to understand how something works. And that piece is important and is consistent to what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
But then I focused on physics, stars, understanding the mechanics of the world, and I didn't have a good PI. He was probably a great PI to grad students. He didn't like undergrads very much, was very open and honest about that. Had I had a different PI, would I have done better in my I did well. I graduated in 3 years. Like, I'm very proud of that accomplishment. But
Yeah.
was I a good physicist? I probably didn't have the tools at my disposal to become a good physicist, right? And I wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
been accepted into grad school. And well, I don't know that, but I didn't even try because I was confident in that. Um, Post graduation, I moved to China. I'd had some life stuff happen that last year. My cousin passed traumatically my last year in undergrad, and I couldn't cope with being in that environment. And so I
Yeah.
left. I moved to China. I learned, I lived there for a year and a half, really thought that was going to be the rest of my life. But then, but this is pre diagnosis. I already
Mm-hmm.
knew that uh, I was the kid that teachers kept an eye on in school because of my suicidality and things like that that I've dealt with
Hmm.
my whole life. So I was always the teen or the young adult that people are like, are they gonna keep breathing? Are we good?
Right.
That kind of person. So but I didn't have anything other than a major depressive disorder diagnosis when I was in China, and but there were social difficulties. I'm very persnickety. I'm very like things should be just so,
Hmm.
but I try to make it like an equitable just so. It's like, no, you're telling me you just don't like communicating, and I think that's unacceptable. And so that team dynamic didn't work out. At that time, my grandfather was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my dad was being deployed to Afghanistan again, and so I needed to come home. And so I came home, and living in my family home was rough. Those types of things. Kept trying to find different careers. Worked in education from the time my job in China was teaching English at an after school program and substitute teaching at an international school. So was teaching over there, came home, substitute taught. Man, that was rough. Uh, uh, Subbing is not for the faint of heart, not in the districts that I was working in. Also, I'm short, so I got called a student a fair bit of times, and that was demoralizing. Like, y'all, did you see the staff badge? Like, I know
Right.
I'm not at your school every day, but I'm not a kid. Come on now. Uh, what about me says, mind you, this would happen at like a K5. So I'm
Hmm.
like,
Wow.
mind you, some of the fifth graders are taller than me, but like, come on. I do not look like a fifth grader, I promise you. So that, uh, then I was like, all right, teaching's not working for me. Was like, well, I like numbers. I did physics, numbers, great. I'll try accounting. That was boring. Oh my gosh. I can do good at it. Like, it would have been a fine career. I would
Yeah.
have done well, but like 1 year and I was bored out of my mind.
Mm.
Uh, like I'd finish the task and literally I'm like getting paid to like scroll the internet because it would take somebody else the entire day and I'm just sitting here bored, but I can't leave. Problem. And
Right.
like through that period, deterioration, mental health, back and forth, got diagnosed in that window. And then I was like, I'll go to school to do IT, but I need a part-time job and landed in behavior analysis as
Mm.
a BT. And autistic people can get really along really well with autistic people. I'm like, these kids I get. Hmm.
Hmm.
Wait, what's happening in this field? Look up what do autistic people think of ABA? Hmm. Okay. Started pursuing masters to start making a change in the field, and yeah, not what I thought would happen when I started my undergrad, but that's the the short version of and tying it back in like that like
Hmm.
how do we support people? What are the mechanics of creating a supportive environment that is involved in what I do now, and really understanding like here's the barriers to good care, um here's what doesn't work in environments, because that's largely what we have is what doesn't work. Okay, well, how do
Right.
we change environments so that they do? How do we make an environment accessible? But we need to really thoroughly break down the environment, which really does utilize what I learned in my physics degree of breaking down problems and
Hmm.
identifying what to solve for. But that's nice and neat on paper, looking at atoms and things that don't have feelings, right? And then you add in the emotions and it becomes quantum pretty quickly. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could definitely see a corollary between being fascinated with why things are happening, why things work, and then thinking about what we talk about in training. Always look for the why behavior. So, I, hearing you talk about it, it doesn't seem as wide of a stretch as maybe it does on paper in a lot of ways.
it seems like a wide stretch, but when you like, I mean, I have all of my context, so I can look at it and be like, yeah, that tracks. That makes sense. Other people maybe not, but we have different contexts.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious, the time you spent in China, what were some of the things that you missed from here while you were there, and when you came back that you missed from there?
Um, So I'm from California and I miss the diversity of some of the environments that I grew up in. Like people from all over the world
Mm-hmm.
are, and I don't believe like America has a problem with like taking and appropriating cultures and things like that. So not that aspect, but like just being around people from a bunch of different walks of life. I miss that aspect because I was around a lot less diversity, though that was a big humbling point and something that I really value learning there is there are a lot of different people groups in China too. Just ethnicity is a different like
Mm-hmm.
culturally rich environment. So I missed some of my friends. I missed the connections. I missed like when you leave a 4-year college environment where you're just so intensely focused on school and you have your
Right.
like small bubble. When that bubble bursts when you leave, I think everybody goes through a period of like, where do I belong? So I think I missed it was just an extreme version of that because I couldn't even visit my friends. The most I
Mm.
could get was a Zoom call, but or a Skype or something. Yeah, because that was pre-Zoom. Um, a Skype call with some friends or something, but then
Yeah.
internet there. If somebody said something off, like the internet could shut off at any point in time. So you've got to be careful with
Mm.
what you talk about. Uh, that you're not talking about, you can't talk about anything like political or anything like that. So you got to be
Mm-hmm.
careful talking about current events and things like that. But I missed my friends. I missed, um, yeah, mostly that shift, but it was just magnified to from normal what people experience when they leave college.
Yeah.
Um, what I miss from there, I do miss that like rich culture. I miss because I lived out in the in Western. Technically, if you look at the map, it's like I was in the central, but I was in a Western province. So
Mm.
um, I miss the food. Uh, I try to make recipes and I find everywhere I go, I find like a hole in the wall place that has something that I can't find anywhere else. And it may or may not be authentic to the region I was in, but the region I was
Yeah.
in, the food isn't commonly found in the States. So it really is, maybe I'll be lucky if I find one place that will have something local to me. And it might be like an adjacent food, but it's not going to be the exact thing. Um, so that type of thing. I miss speaking the language. I like adventure. So I miss that feeling of independence and like, hey, I am capable to live internationally by myself. Like, I'm good. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah. And my roommate happens to live only an hour from that time period, happens to live only an hour and a half away now at
Mm.
random. She's from the East Coast, I'm from the West Coast, but somehow we landed both in the mid east. Uh or Midwest, sorry. So
Yep.
So, kind of thinking about some of the things you talked about, as far as autism and being implanted in the BCBA realm. So, in one of your bios I read, I think it was on your business site, it said, "I'm not a fan of applied behavior analysis, which makes me a bit of an odd duck of a provider." So, what does that mean? Like, how do you feel like that makes you an odd duck, and how does it benefit you coming from autism into that field?
think it benefits me because I actually see my clients as fully human. Behavior analysis, I work in behavior analysis, and so it makes me an odd duck because I work in a field I don't like.
Mm.
I am here to disrupt the field. I am not here to lift up the field. And
Gotcha.
I don't mince words around that. Like I'm in a PhD program and I got in with I was very honest in my interview, like, yes, I want a PhD in behavior analysis so that I can change behavior analysis. I'm not
Mm.
here to make behavior analysts feel good about themselves and what they do. I'm here to make you think about your autistic clients as fully human because most don't. And that comes from the basis of where like treatment hour recommendations and what evidence-based practice is considered in the field comes from those initial studies done by Lovas and his compatriots literally did not believe autistic people were fully human. Believe that that's where that puzzle piece comes from. they have the component parts to be human, and I'm like sitting here in front of me, am I subhuman? Am I like partly human? No. Like, are
Right,
any of the people we work with partly human? No. We're just a different type of person. And that dehumanization is where behavior analysis comes from. And people don't like to reckon with that. And it makes sense, like the trauma piece, like cognitive dissonance. Your amygdala is firing and saying defend. So I must say that this isn't the reality. I can't handle that being a reality that like I am complicit with.
right.
And I make it a habit of owning that. Like, this is where behavior analysis comes from. I am part of that system as a behavior analyst. However, I will not remain complicit. I will do the work to dig us out as a field. Will the rest of the field? It remains to be seen. And there's a lot of infighting in the field around that. And I'm not interested. I'm interested in doing better. I'm interested in building better. And so I like try to, I'll have those conversations where it's applicable, but I think a lot of people that are like advocating for change, it's talk. Not a lot are actually doing the work. It's like, well, this is what we shouldn't do. This is what we shouldn't do. Okay, what should we do? And I feel like more of us need to step into that space of let's collaborate with autistic people outside of the field who their job is advocacy. I consider myself an advocate, but that is hindered by being a behavior analyst. My effectiveness as an autistic advocate is diminished by my choice to practice within the field to change on that side. But I'm comfortable with that choice because I think that harm reduction matters. And I have the capacity to do that, and not all autistic people choose to use their effort and energy in that way, and that's a valid choice too. But I want to push us forward, and not for the salvation of behavior analysis. I don't care if the field burns, I'll get another certification, I'll go do something else. I don't care. I'm not here to save my livelihood. And a lot of people are, and I understand that. Like, you gotta pay to survive in this world just like everybody else. But I'm not here to save that. I'm here to make sure we know what non-traumatized autistic people look like across a lifespan. I'm here for harm reduction and for and I don't need to defend if behavior analysis is a science, then it doesn't need my defense. It will defend itself. And if it's not, well, then it's not a science. Why are we having this conversation?
Right.
To begin with. Why does it matter? So that, I guess, is what I mean by being an odd duck. Is I'm not here to make behavior analysis as an entity feel better. I'm not here to make behavior analysts feel better. I'm here to help us push forward.
Gotcha. So, kind of thinking along with this conversation, I feel like I've heard a lot over the years traveling is, well, you can't mix ABA and trauma-informed care together. What's your view on that?
The polite way is to say that is BS. I can say that in a more full-fledged statement, and that is what I mean when I say BS, but I'll leave it kosher, or I'll leave it like friendly for a wider audience. It's BS. Because they think there are people in behavior analysis who think that anything not behavior analytic is not evidence. So there are behavior analysts who don't think speech and OT are evidence-based practice. And sorry friends, that's just not the case. And some that think that all psychology other than behavior analysis is mentalistic and is not evidence-based. I'm like, just because it's not evidence the way you like it, like ABA views single subject design as gold standard, and again, physics background. No, it's not. Like, it has good to offer. It has a place. It is not inferior, but it is not the only way to do science. And so there's this like insular quality in behavior analysis that is really part of the chokehold and why it's so hard to change the field, because people don't want to let go of that rigidity. Like ABA is meant to treat, in quotes, treat autism and autistic people to reduce our rigidity. Pot and kettle, pretty strong resemblance there. That rigidity, we need more flexibility. So like trauma is scientifically, like, understanding of trauma, physiological changes in the brain. Like, I can geek out about trauma stuff all day long, and that's because I like to understand how things work, why our brains do what they do. Same thing, why I find stars fascinating, and like understanding my own behavior. I have a metric ton of trauma in my own life, complex and simple, for lack of a better, like acute trauma. Um, and I see it play out. I can observe that chain, but some people are just not open-minded in the field. They think that anything that is not externally observable, and because you can't explain it in an explicit way, it's just, well, you don't have the skill yet to do that. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And there are people in the field who don't agree with that, who think if it's not explainable in a very quick, then it's not real, or it's mentalistic.
Yeah, I mean, just with trauma alone, it hasn't been that long ago that trauma was thought of as a social construct, right? Oh, you go through something hard, you feel bad, then you just get over it. And now the neurology, like constantly, I just feel like the neuroscience just keeps revealing more and more and more of that connection where it's kind of like once you know better, you can never go back. Like once you know the truth, you can't go back.
But that cognitive dissonance, people don't want to know better, because then it makes, there's this thing that happens when a BCBA or anyone in behavior analysis becomes exposed to, and parents too, parents of disabled kids, who've put their kids in ABA or things like that, like schools, teachers, anybody connected to behaviorism, when they're exposed to the harms that behaviorism can cause, there's this, well, I've caused harm. And they can't sit, that fires them up, and they can't, out of self-defense, move past that. Which, empathy, you deserve care and support to navigate through that. If your response is to dig your heels in and do more harm and refuse to believe or recognize or accept that it is harm, then I don't feel bad for you if the field blows up and you lose your career because you chose to dig your heels in without regard for new evidence. Now, I'm a big believer in changing your opinion when you get new information. I don't know who the original quote came from. Been trying to find it since I saw the quote, but like, normalize changing your opinion when you get new information. A lot of people aren't. They're like, I want to be right and I want to have been right for forever. Like, I don't want to have ever been wrong. Whereas we need to shift into a mindset of like, I want to do the right thing, whatever that is, whether I knew it the whole time or not. If there's more information that helps me be more right, not so that I can be right and win an argument, but because I want to do good. In a non-saviorist way, I want to be a decent human to all those I interact with. Therefore, if I'm doing something wrong or harmful, I want to know. And I want to do the work. I'll go bring it up to my therapist and talk through that all day long, however much I need to, so that I can be a better human to the people around me. But a lot of people aren't, for whatever reason, in a space to step into that. And they feel attacked and like a personal threat when they're that harm. But we're all human. We're all light or dark, light and dark. We all have the propensity to cause harm. We all have the capability of healing as well, and being decent humans. And you know what? We're all going to cause harm and do good.
Because we're human.
That's yep. But people don't want to be associated with harm, that like rigid binary thinking. They don't want to face that. And I've been in that space. I like, when I do wrong, it like, as an autistic person with some very like strong rigidities, it hurts to send an email and say, I did something wrong here, this is on me. But as a supervisor, if my boss, like, hey, your person that you're supervising didn't do a note on time, or like, why did this happen? If it's on me, the way I can be the best human possible is to send that email and say, that was on me, not on them. If anyone's getting in trouble here, it's me. And that is hard. It's very worthwhile. Not like hard, like pity, like
Yeah,
party,
yeah.
what have you, but like recognition, like I like being right, not because I want to, like I am always right, but because I want to do the best I can as a human. And when I haven't, that's hard. But I'm gonna swallow that because I want to do good, you know?
Yeah.
I my need and want to be right is not above actually being a decent human, right? It's the want to do right is based on wanting to be a decent human. So if I've done wrong, being a decent human requires me to own that, right? And
Yeah.
people feel attacked and they shy away from that when they aren't seeing it as an invitation to do better. They aren't seeing that information as a welcome into the like being an even more like behavior analysis. We talk about shaping. That's a
Hmm.
behavior analytic process, right? Like
Hmm.
they don't see that as an invitation to shape their behavior towards better, but they want their clients to shape their behavior towards what they see as better. So they're not willing to like do the work themselves in their own life. And I think a lot of times there's a lack of awareness of that. They're not even, well, I'm the behavior analyst. Obviously, I know how to navigate behavior. You're not understanding your own responses and environments,
Hmm.
because you're removing this entire context of like different brains and trauma exist. So you can't possibly have that conversation with yourself at all, which is really unfortunate and sad, frankly.
Gotcha. So thinking about, oh, you're fine. You're fine. I feel like when people talk more, it makes it easier. So, thinking about some of the things you were just talking about, um, everyone having a capacity to do harm and do good, right? But I think that people in general, and this kind of goes to the core belief that we teach, people inherently want to do well, right? You know, people don't just wake up and like, oh, I hope that today's horrible, or that I fail, or I make a mistake, or I hurt someone's feelings, or whatever it may be. So thinking about that, you've been a Ukiro trainer now for 2 years, right? So how does Ukiro as an approach, how does that apply to the work that you do every day?
Everything. It and Ukero is something that, so I know that, or you're the architect, so you have a martial arts background, if I'm understanding context correctly.
Yeah.
I was a martial artist for 13, 14 years, and I still consider myself a martial artist, but I'm out of practice because of injuries and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, and that's something that drew me to Ukero when I learned about it, because that piece is really important in my worldview and how my worldview developed to begin with, is that like um understanding of practice and respect and diligence and um being the best that you can be in a given day. And so Ukeru really put a package around how do you take that and apply it in your work. Like it was a very like translational, because a lot of the things, uh, I haven't used restraint in years, even before Ukeru,
Hmm.
um, because I don't feel like I need to as a martial artist. Like when somebody punches me, it doesn't faze me. I'm like, I used to do this for sport, kid. Like, we're good. Get your feelings out, but here's this other
Hmm.
thing to hit instead, you know? Um, but it helped me start learning how to, I can't boil down 14 years, 13 years of martial arts into a staff training in one day.
Hmm.
Right. I can't make somebody else not feel activated in the presence of aggression.
Hmm.
Um, and Ukiru helps with that. It helps explain a lot of that, like background information about trauma, and then being able to give people tools and support them in gaining skill areas so that they don't flip in the presence of aggression and self-injury. There's this switch, I think, in our brains where we are either in like regular mode or self-defense mode.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
there's
I
a
agree
third
with that.
option, crisis management. Like, and a lot of people in the line of work that we're in flip from, they don't have that third option. They don't have the button to switch into like intense calm, and like matching the environment and not seeing aggression as a self-defense opportunity. Most people flip in the work environment into self-defense and treat it as such, and therefore their bodies react as such. And having a language of like, know what's going on for you in this moment. It's okay if you're in a self-defense mode. I don't think this is a self-defense mode from an outside perspective. Like, we're in a work environment. I'm right here. If someone's getting punched, I'm getting in front, so it's not you. It makes sense for you to be activated though. And that's okay. Like, care for yourself and take that space that you need. But like helping create that distance for other people. I'm grateful for my background, but I can't be there to take that crisis situation in every single opportunity. Need to be able
Right.
to pass on that skill to the families that I work at. Like right now I work directly with families, and I have a different job that I'm not a new care trainer for because it's a completely different company, but working in group homes, and passing on that calm, that like, hey, I'll be okay. And that not a numbness, like not that like callus that builds up over time when you do the work.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
some people, like you're saying, people want to do well, but I'm sure we've all seen that person that, or have even been that person who was like, what am I gonna face today? Like, I'm ready for the adrenaline rush, and like they're not wanting the crisis to happen, but they're in that excited energy, that
It's like you're
escalated
expecting
state
it.
themselves.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're expecting it, you're gonna be met with it, right? Because that you're adding that to the environment. But passing along that calm of like, this isn't self-defense. Like when I do the training, something that I like to say is like, you best believe that if this were a back alley, I would not be this gentle and I would make it home. Like
Yeah.
the technique I would use for self-defense would be very, very different. I do not care if this person goes away with a broken bone. I do care that our client goes home without one, even though they're hitting us.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's something I know I've frequently run into ever since we've been teaching this is, oh, well, I know you teach this, but we use this type of technique, or why don't we do this? And the short answer is because if you want to be trauma informed, that's not it. Right? You know, if I do something that shuts off an airway or creates a gag reflex and anything else, you know, that's, if the goal is to calm the amygdala and be trauma informed, like there has to be a limitation on that.
And people don't like limits, especially when they feel like they're in that self-defense space. But it's like, learn the third room, learn the button, like make that shift so that way you don't feel like you're threatened in this moment. Like this person is feeling threatened. We don't need to add that. But empathy for the experience of like not having access to that skill, like just like we're working with clients or residents or whomever we're supporting to build new neural pathways. You got to support staff, parents, teachers, whomever were around to learn new neural pathways too. And that's hard because there's less neuroplasticity in adults. You know.
No, the positive thing is, you know, even as early as 5 to 6 years ago, they thought that past a certain age, your brain just stops producing neurons. And they're actually finding, well, that's not across the board, you know, that they're finding more and more. So there's a lot of things we could do to take better cares of our brains and thought processes. And I'm not sure that TikTok is it, but
You know, I I think there's bad ways to use social media and there's good ways to use social media. Moderation with all things is important.
Right.
It just is the new thing, so people want to say it's all bad. I'm like, well, what's your advice? Could say the same thing about whatever it is. I'm not real. I have a TikTok account for when people send me links, but I can't pretend to understand how TikTok works.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of my coworkers, because we travel a good bit training, and they'll be like, "Oh, why don't you have a TikTok account?" I was like, "Because I know how much time I waste on YouTube. So I can only imagine if I had something where I got shorter videos and a greater access." I was like, "I'm trying to keep my focus the best I can." So,
There. I guess you could say I do the same, but it's just the squirrels are too active in my brain. I can't
Right.
track them down as it is. TikTok is not super accessible for me, but it's more accessible as a media thing for other people. So, no fault in it for not being accessible to me.
So let me ask you, as someone who's autistic, what benefit, or do you see benefit, that Ukiri has when working with families, schools, or other organizations who are working with neurodiverse individuals?
It helps when you bring things into the physical. And people, like you're talking about, when you come across behavior analysts who are like, trauma has informed care has no place in behavior analysis because it's not behavioral. I'm like, okay. That's your worldview, man. I don't know what to tell you. But that's the thought there, because it's a mirror of society. Society at large struggles with stigma towards autism, towards any disability of any kind, towards mental health. And neurodiversity is a wide umbrella. Neurodivergence is a wide umbrella on purpose, and it's meant to be all inclusive. Neurodivergent is not synonymous with autism and ADHD. A lot of people see it as synonymous, but that is not factually correct. Fibromyalgia, MS, PTSD, mood and personality differences, like multiple personality systems type of brains and people, pain disorders, all of that is neurologically based and is therefore part of that neurodivergent umbrella. And Ukero, I think, because it talks about the physiological changes and has that, like, not watered down, but like, here's a like one lecture kind of intro course to neuroscience kind of information, it can help highlight the physicality. Because when people can't see something, they like to say, oh, that's all in your head. Yes, but your brain's an organ.
Right.
Just because we don't understand it. I mean, people thought the earth was flat because they'd never gone all the way around, right? And there unfortunately still people who believe that, right?
I was thinking that. I was thinking that.
I'll say it for us, like, there are people who still believe the earth is flat. And you're like, my friend, what? All right. All right. Cool. Again, similar to my response to behavior analysts who are like, no, trauma isn't behavior analytic. I'm like, that's your worldview. I guess you can stay over there. But I don't really know what to say to you. But people who aren't sure who to listen to, like, you've got those like two ends of like acceptance and understanding that like trauma is real and all of this, and then people who are like, nah, the earth is flat and trauma doesn't exist. People in the middle don't know who to listen to. And Ukeru is one way to provide information towards, and again, I'm biased. I clearly have an opinion
Sure.
on what is accurate and it's fair to people to disagree with me. I'm not a know-it-all. I'm sure I'll get new information someday, and I'm like, okay, my worldview's got to expand some more because that happens all the time. But it gives that pathway of like, there is a physiological change. There is a physical change that happens with trauma, and here's the proof. Now, we don't have the brain scans for everybody, so like, don't use that barrier of free healthcare in equitable healthcare to
Right.
deny the existence of physiological changes. Well, there's just behavioral for them. Maybe, but why is the behavior necessary?
Yeah.
And kind of like, it presents it in a like way that is hopefully less charged. And I think it's harder, the training is harder for parents to sit through because parents are more like emotionally connected to situations. And when I've done the training with parents, there's like, it takes longer than the 8 hours by far, because we've got to pause a lot to talk through the like whatever the parent is experiencing behaviorally or emotionally in a moment. Like, so you're telling me that in this moment, this is how I like reacted to my kid, and that maybe caused this physiological difference, and that can be hard to sit with.
Yeah.
And it's okay to spend that time and take that effort to like, it's okay though. Like, what are you doing now? Learning, changing your opinion, being a more decent human to your kids. So that is what's important. Not that you're never like, we have this like demand in society to always be perfect at all times and to never do any wrong, and that's just not possible. And if it sets that there's this bar that is unachievable, and then people feel like it's an attack when you say that they haven't achieved an impossible thing. Like, that hand holding is important, right? That like, the standard you're holding yourself to and the standard you're holding your kid to are both impossible.
Yeah.
Let's change what the standard is together. You're gonna be okay. I know it's hard. I come from authoritarian background. Like, when I was a substitute teacher, I tried power and control, but then like substitute teaching in a high school as a 4'11" individual and a teenager, how are you gonna stop me from leaving the room? You're right.
You make a good point.
Right? And I needed to be checked, right? Because I didn't have the skills that I have now. And would I have been less I was frankly traumatized as a sub, but I also like worked in a school district with some people who had previously caused me harm, and that was challenging. So it wasn't all the sub stuff. But if I knew now or if I knew then what I know now, if I had the skills that I have now when I was a sub, I would have never gained the skills that I have, but like, it wouldn't have been nearly as traumatizing because I know how to respond. And now teens are my favorite age group to work with. I'm like, give me the sass all day long. We're good. I'm chilling. I'm not worried. If you leave the room, I'll just call the office. It's fine. What choice do you want to make? Like, it's okay, but that comes with age, and I have learned a lot. You know.
Well, hopefully we're always learning, right?
I never want to stop. I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm back in school. Why? I know why I'm back in school, but like, I'm a glutton for punishment. I don't know that I'll ever stop. I want to do a postdoc afterwards because I want to respecialize, but again, glutton for punishment. Never stop learning. Always want to have a book in hand. Or an audiobook or whatever is accessible that particular moment.
So outside of all this work that you do between advocacy and the consulting and the training, you've got quite a bit of hobbies from what I read.
Yes.
Various outlets for creativity. I noticed on your creative site, you talked about your main focus right now is poetry and quilting. What is it about those? Because looking at it from the outside, those seem like two very different things. Like, what is it about poetry and quilting itself that has the most appeal to you?
Well, I think my main hobby is collecting hobbies. So you know, so that's why sometimes they seem disparate, because I just collect them, and new shiny rock, new skill. I like learning new things. For me, poetry and quilting is getting back to basics. I've gone through a lot of unexpected and drastic life changes that I'm really having to reckon with who I am. And in some of the things that I've experienced, I think I'm very prone to being a chameleon and people pleasing, and it's really hard to unlearn that. And because I like to be right and I don't like to hurt people, I'm very easily, I am one of those autistic people that proves why uh learning about abuse and safety and stuff is really important. And that's a hard reality to reckon with. But part of that is this like feeling within myself that I need to get back to who I am and go back to things that like I may have let go of at some point in the last 15 years to please somebody else, or because it just didn't fit into what I thought life had to be. Like I was trying to create a box that would satisfy society, and there's no box that I can fit into that society's gonna like. I am just a polarizing individual, and that's okay. And it's just in the last couple of years that I've like come to accept and realize that because people are, well, just let it roll off your back when somebody bullies you or does this. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. Like that how. The reason I like to understand how is because I don't know how I fit into that mechanic. A clear example is I did gymnastics as a young kid. This will circle back, I promise. Uh, uh, and I couldn't figure out cartwheels, and that's like gymnastics 101. They would show me, and I'd be like, how? And they'd show me, and they'd do a cartwheel, and I'm like, great, I can see you know how to do the cartwheel. Mind you, I'm a little kid and I don't know how to articulate any of this, so I'm just trying to do cartwheel, try, because I don't like giving up. Falling on my back, falling on my hip, falling on my face, falling on my butt, 10 years later, I'm in a martial, or like probably not 10 years, maybe like 6 to 7 years later, I'm in a Taekwondo class, an extreme Taekwondo class that incorporates aerial arts into martial arts. And they're like, Elfers, you don't know how to do a cartwheel? Hand, kick, kick. Instantly got it. As soon as because I fell on my hip, I'm a black belt in this, and they're like, you don't know how to do a cartwheel? What the heck? Like I was getting dragged, but like it's not like the bullying kind, just to like,
Yeah.
you can do all these cool things and you can't do that basic of a thing. And no, I could never get to an aerial because I can't commit. Like I drop the hand, I can't do it. But they gave me the how, right? And like same thing socially, a lot of like things with being autistic is not having the same roadmap downloaded as the rest of people, because and I think frankly other people, like people who aren't autistic, are just comfortable not having a roadmap and making it up, because I don't think there is one, is something that I've come to realize. But I'm not comfortable. I need to know how so that I know what I'm doing, and I need to be able to walk myself through how to do things. And part of that, how to be who I am unapologetically, has been the root of a lot of my mental health struggles. And as I'm going through new life changes that I didn't see coming, the curveballs I faced this year, like a friend of mine and I have been calling this year a dumpster fire full of dumpster fires, or even made and ordered stickers off Canva because it was such an apt description based on what I've and people I know in my life are experiencing this year. It's just awful. But it's also a growth opportunity, and part of I don't know how else to relearn who I am in the context of these changes, but to go back to basics. And my maternal grandmother taught me how to quilt when I was real young, and I've always written poetry. I found my my middle school and high school poetry journal the other day, and oh my gosh, like I'm not gonna repeat any of them, but like I wrote some not very good stuff back in the day. But those two things are more intrinsic to who I am. So what better way to like I collect hobbies, I think, as a trauma response. Like I don't know how to be at rest. I don't know how to relax. So, well, maybe this hobby will do it. Maybe this hobby will do it. Maybe this hobby will do it. Um, and so I'm going back to the ones that are more natural to my history. Like I didn't pick quilting. That is something passed down generationally, but
Mm.
I want to connect with that. Like I want to some of my most treasured blankets, and I'm a blanket hoarder, are the ones that have been made by people in my family, the ones I've made. Like I have one right next to me that I've made. Um, and I like playing, and like learning how I color outside the lines in everything that I do. And my
Mhm.
Nana's a very traditional quilter, follows the rules, measures twice, cuts once, probably measures 4 or 5 times if we're being honest, and I respect it and makes beautiful um traditional quilt designs. Um, but how do I do it my way? Because when I try to do something like that, it ups my anxiety because
Mhm.
my hand I have carpal tunnel nerve issues all throughout my body. So being able to do it that way and not hurt really badly isn't accessible to me, but I want to quilt. I want to learn how to do that. So you know what? I'm gonna learn how to do appliques and learn how to be okay with the missing thread here or there and learn how to you know what, there are no rules but have fun. Um
Yeah.
so long as you're not infringing on the rights of others, but it's kind of hard to do that quilting. So, I think that's pretty easy. And same in poetry. I've never been a follow the rules person. I don't write by a particular meter, write by a particular style. I just write. And I break lines up in weird ways and like move this one word, and it's about that like spoken word aspect. I really love spoken word. So when I'm
Mhm.
writing them, it's how I would speak it, including those pregnant pauses. Um, and like indicating that grammatically however you can, and people are like, well, your writing isn't very academic, and I'm like, I don't care. I don't. I frankly don't. I just want to explore and really, yeah, when you learn you've been living a lie and living for somebody else, when you're somebody who prides yourself in, like I pride myself in living life with my full chest, and to have been cajoled or whatever into living a lie, you got to go back to basics and you got to re-understand yourself with the new information, and that can be a lot to integrate, and so going back to basics is a good way for me to do that, and it's enjoyable. Make quilts, my cats like to steal them before they're done, write poetry, and it helps me process my big feelings. That's my replacement behavior, to bring it back to behaviorism and crisis management. If I have a big feeling, cry it out, find the words, put it on paper, and then the emotion is stored there and it doesn't have to like tear up my body anymore, because I feel things very intensely. And that helps me understand my clients, like, well, their brother just like walked past them too close. Why are they now screaming and yelling and threatening to attack them? I'm like, it didn't feel big to you, but it felt big to them. I don't understand why. But there are
Mhm.
some things that have felt really big to me that didn't really make logical sense to feel that big. Doesn't matter. That's the feeling. Okay, now how do you redirect that? And like I've learned over the years to store those emotions in writing, store them in what I make with my hands. Because then I can release it and it's there. If I need to revisit that emotion, I can go to wherever I stored that emotion, whether it
Right.
be in writing or in another piece of art, and I can feel the full weight of it when I revisit it. But I don't have to be like terrorized by my own intensity because I'm a lot. It's a lot to hold in one small. I'm on 4'11". Like that's a lot to hold in my body. Uh, you know. I don't know if that answers that question well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, like I said, I appreciate you taking the time and just having a good conversation, learning more about you than I get to learn when I just have someone in training for 1 or 2 days. So it's always a pleasure to get a deeper understanding of folks, and also just appreciate the work and thought that you're putting into not only helping people but also creating change for folks.
Thank you. And thank you for the chat and opportunity to jump on here. I'm not used to being on podcasts, so it's a fun
ride, I guess.
Yeah, this is episode 16, and I'm still getting used to it. So
I have a friend who we want to start a podcast, but I'm like, we keep saying we want to, and then we do them, and they're socially draining, but we love them. Cost benefit analysis of spoons, if you know spoon theory, of how much energy. Yeah, it's interesting, and all the things that go on in the background to make them happen. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
But
where can people look up your business if they're interested in learning more about services you do, or even checking out your poetry, any of the creative outlets?
Perspectives Behavior Consulting LLC is my company. I have it on my arm. It's really hard to share. There we go. There's a right there. Perspectives is important. So Perspectives Behavior Consulting. My social media handle, which is the same as my like kind of creative side, which still exists, but I haven't added anything in recent months with life going on. But it's AUT as in the drink HD _ goblin. D&D reference. And also a running joke that ADHDers are goblins. And I'm like, I'm here for it. I do have a fair bit of goblin energy. In ADHD is a kind of signifier for somebody who's autistic and has ADHD. And I love tea. So instead of the first D there, tea. So just a joke embedded in there. Yeah. I'm active on social media, mainly Instagram. But it's mostly just share. Right now, it's frankly just sharing where I'm at in life. The poetry will come out of where I'm at in life, but first I gotta live it, kind of thing. But yeah.
Oh, cool. I appreciate it. Take care, and I'm sure we'll talk again in the near future.
Sounds good. Thank you for your time.